I never believed in the paranormal, considering myself a naturalist. Everything has a rational explanation. I didn't believe in ghosts or ghoulies, but for some reason, I am drawn to unexplainable stories of the macabre. They fascinate and chill me, especially as a non-believer. They raise that question in the back of my mind. What if you're wrong? What if the world isn't the ordered and predictable place that all evidence points to? It cracks open a door, casting a faint and chilling light on a comfortably mundane world. I finally had a look through that door, a look at what lurks and possibly on the other side. I have a story of my own to share. Last week, I found myself in a particularly bad state. My mental illness has always been a struggle, and while I've mostly learned to live life despite it, there are still bad days. Unable to cope with the litany of chores, tasks, and self-improvement I had on my plate, I decided to browse a forum cataloging supposedly haunted places in my area. That's when one listing just a few miles from me caught my eye and drained the blood from my face. Thompson Lake Inn, room 243. Guests have reported whispers at night, shouts of racial and homophobic slurs, temperature fluctuations, and quiet sobbing. The television reportedly turns itself on and switches to channel 27, defying all attempts to be changed. I called the hotel to book room 243 for the next night. How could I not? I never had a good relationship with my father. When I was a child, he was physically abusive to my mother and me. While that eventually stopped, the emotional abuse that followed was worse. There were good days, of course, kind words, genuine love, sage advice. But it's not the fond memories that leave the deepest marks. I carry a lot of scars and fear from that trauma, but the worst is lingering. Persistent fear that I'm doomed to become like him. That we carry the same sickness, the same dark stain on our hearts, and someday, that darkness will metastasize and I'll hurt the people that I love. I say this in a fear, but there's a voice in the back of my mind that is convinced it is a certainty. You're sick, it says. You're selfish, angry, and sick. And you're going to hurt your partners. They'll be better off without you. They have each other. You're just going to bring them down. The best thing would be to remove yourself from the equation. I've learned to let these thoughts pass over and through me, but some days it's harder than others. At dinner that night, I told my partners that I needed to get away for a night and had booked a hotel. I could see the uncertainty and fear in their eyes. They knew I was in a dark place. They always knew. Why do you need to get away, Duke? What's going on? I'm just a little drained, guys. I just need a little time to myself. It'll be okay, I promise. Some part of me knew that was a lie. We talked some more about it, and I was able to convince them that there was no crisis and I would be okay. I told them I was just going to watch TV, play my Switch, smoke a mountain of weed, and order delivery. After dinner, I packed a bag. I will never forget the last words my father spoke to me. You NF'er, he spit into my face, over and over again. His elderly frame puffed up and his chest bumped into mine. He somehow shot at it through gritting teeth, the wet impact of his saliva punctuating each word. It hurt. Of course it hurt. But I realized long ago he was mentally unwell. He was in immense pain, and the only thing he knew to do with that pain was to lash out and inflict it on those around him. It was the only catharsis he knew. Since I was a child, I begged him to get help, but I was always dismissed the same way. I don't need your psychobabble. And so the abuse continued, and it still hurt like a fresh wound every time. but I always reminded myself it was just because he himself was suffering. Somehow, that didn't really make anything better. I had been living back at home with my partners after a failure to launch my career post-college. Finally, we all had jobs and had saved enough to move out. And miraculously, I had convinced my mother to move with us, to finally save her from the abuse she had endured from his venomous words. Needless to say, he didn't take it well. I set my jaw, steeled myself, and continued to pack while he followed me around, repeating those same 2 words he said to me over and over again, trying, I think, to goad me into hitting him. We made it out, and everything was great for a while, until my mother, with grim predictability, decided to move back home. It was a perfectly normal budget hotel, with a perfectly friendly staff member at the front desk. I was worried someone would recognize me, but she seemed to be new. Check-in went smoothly until she paused when she saw that I had specifically requested room 243. "Are you a paranormal investigator?" she asked. "No." "Are you aware that a guest passed in that room a few years ago, and guests have reported strange occurrences ever since?" "Yes, I am." "Well, if you ask me, it's just a rumor that got out of hand. I hope you have a wonderful and restful stay. Please dial 0 for the front desk if you need anything at any time." After handing over my ID and payment card, she seemed to take note of my local address and raised an eyebrow. "Are you expecting any guests tonight, sir? They'll need to register at the front desk upon arrival." "No, it'll just be me." I placed the parking pass she had provided me on my dash, grabbed my bag, and made my way up the stairs. There in front of me was room 243. I thought my memories had faded with the passing years, but as I stood there, everything rushed back. That day became crystal clear in my mind's eye. I took a few deep breaths to calm myself, remind myself that there was no such things as ghosts, and opened the door. It was a smallish room, billed as a suite, but as far as I can tell, the only supporting evidence for that claim was a single step up to the back of the room where the bed was housed. Before me was a small sitting area with 2 chairs and a coffee table, facing a set of drawers supporting a TV and a microwave, with a small refrigerator housed underneath. Above the bed, a window provided a serene and calming view of Thompson Lake. The room was pristine, not at all how I had remembered it. Everything was clean. The furniture was all in the appropriate places, and the bed was made with the mattress neatly centered on its frame. I unpacked my overnight bag and decided to watch some TV. It flickered on, and I was greeted by the face of a familiar newscaster. A chill ran down my spine as I noticed the number 27 in the corner of the screen. I was being silly. Lots of people enjoyed watching the news. The last guest was probably just watching it before they left. I took a deep breath and changed the channel to Cartoon Network, wanting something light to clear the gathering dark clouds in my mind. After watching a couple of episodes of Steven Universe, I decided to take a nice, relaxing bath. The lavender bath bomb I brought melted the stress away, and I recommitted myself to doing the best I could to just relax and enjoy some time to myself. And that's when I heard the newscaster again from the other room, and the volume on the TV began a rapid ascent to maximum. My father and I eventually reached a strained detente over my sexuality. He genuinely liked my partners and welcomed them into his home, but any direct raising of the topic of my orientation was to be strictly avoided. If a remotely queer story came on the TV or radio, the channel would quickly be changed. He would still persist in occasionally giving me advice about the kind of girl that I should marry, talking wistfully about the daughter-in-law and grandchildren he would meet someday. I don't know if he knew how much those comments hurt me. It wasn't always that peaceful though. There was one day in middle school that will forever be burned into my brain. I was a closeted Mormon teenager, and I had found some exciting pictures online and printed them out. I kept them hidden in a book buried deep on my shelf and thought my secret shame was safe. And then one day I came home, and my father was waiting for me at the kitchen table with 3 items in front of him: the book, the photos, and a revolver. He radiated an anger that I'd never felt before. It was calm, placid, determined, and that made it 1,000 times more terrifying than the usual rages I was accustomed to. I sat at the table trembling, waiting for him to say something. After what felt like an eternity, the silence was broken. "Are you queer?" No, of course not." His hand moved toward the revolver. "Are you a queer?" I managed to think quickly and stammer out a story about a bully at school who had called me gay, and my plan to get revenge by planting the pictures in his locker. There was another pause that went on forever, and then he told me I needed to be a man and stand up to my bullies directly. He picked up the revolver and placed it in his waistband, and then took the photos and shredded it. We never talked about it again. "It's an old TV, sir. Sometimes they act up like that. It's nothing to be worried about." I wondered to myself as I dripped lavender-scented bathwater on the hotel carpet how many times she had delivered this line. "I understand, of course, I understand, but it's still troubling to me. Can you please send someone to replace the TV with another unit, or at least remove it?" The front desk agent allowed herself a deep sigh. "Of course, sir. We have some vacancies tonight. I'll send someone to swap out your television." I dried off and got dressed, and then unplugged the TV and set up at the door, partially for my own sanity, and partially for the convenience of the staff coming to retrieve it. I laid down on the bed, fired up the switch, and lost myself in Breath of the Wild. I considered breaking out one of the joints that I had brought, but weed tends to make me paranoid, and I thought better of it. Sometime later, there was a knock at the door, and after opening it, a gruff hotel employee strode in with a new TV. "Thanks again, and I'm very sorry for the hassle," I said as I fumbled through my wallet for a tip. I pulled out $10 and left it on the couch next to where he was working to connect the new TV. He grunted in response and continued with his work. As he stood up, he glanced at the money I had left, but made no move to take it. He sized me up, looked me squarely in the eyes and said, "We don't have any more TVs to swap out tonight. If this one gives you trouble too, I suggest just unplugging it. There's a TV in the lobby if you want to watch something. Janine will be happy to change it to whatever channel you like." I waited a bit too long to say thank you, but managed to blurt it out as the door was closing behind him. I locked the door and laid back on the bed. For a few minutes, I regarded the black rectangle of the television, and then went back to playing my Nintendo Switch. About an hour later, I decided some more Steven Universe was in order. Feeling foolish over my fear of a simple LCD panel, I grabbed the new remote and turned the television on. Once again, I was greeted by the news. I felt my stomach drop, but chided myself for being irrational. I pressed the channel up button on the remote. Nothing happened. I tried the channel down button on the remote. Still nothing. I stood up and I walked over to the TV, using the physical buttons on its bottom bezel, but still nothing. Nothing, that is, until the volume started mounting again. I tried turning it off, but none of the buttons would respond. Panic rising, I pushed the dresser away from the wall and unplugged the TV, and was finally left with nothing but the sound of my own ragged breath and racing heart. I don't know why I didn't leave. Nothing was keeping me there, but some part of me deep inside knew this was something I had to see through to the end. I did know one thing, however. I did not want to be sober anymore, And with the weed off the table, I bade myself to not worry about the obscene markups and raid the minibar. I don't know how long I stood there staring into that little white box. There were no $10 tiny bottles of vodka, no $8 Kit Kat bars, no bottled water. There were just two things: a vial of insulin and a needle. Shortly after moving out, I discovered my parents had lost their house. They had financial problems that they had hidden from me and took no steps to stop the foreclosure. They didn't even file for bankruptcy. My parents, I eventually learned, were the kind of people to sit back and trust that if they ignored their problems hard enough, Jesus would sort it all out for them. I felt a gnawing guilt, but I knew I couldn't take them in. I didn't think I would survive it. Thankfully, their church was there to help them, moving them from motel to motel while my aunt worked to buy them a modest home near where she lived in Montreal. And then one day, about a month later, I got a call from my mom. They had a fight and she was staying with a friend for a few days. But my father wasn't answering his phone, and she was worried. Her friend was at work, and she had no way to go check on him. I tried to assure her that he was fine, to tell her she was overreacting. He probably just had his phone on silent. She could get a ride to see him when her friend was off work. In truth, I was just terrified to see him again. My mother was inconsolable, so I gathered my courage and made my way to the Thompson Lake Inn. The whole time, I heard his last words to me ringing over and over in my head. My knocks on the door of room 243 went unanswered. I went to the front desk, and a friendly staff member named Greg informed me that he hadn't seen my father leave all day, and he would be happy to unlock the room for a wellness check. Hopeful thoughts repeated like a mantra in my head as we made our way back to the room. He just went on a walk and nobody saw him leave, or he's asleep. This is all the big misunderstanding. When the door opened, the first thing that I noticed was the mess. Furniture was knocked over. The mattress was pushed off the box spring and leaning against the wall, and the TV was lying broken on the ground. And then I stepped in and I saw him there in the corner. I'd like to say that I rushed to his side, checked for a pulse, performed a CPR, called for an ambulance, but I just stood there frozen. Greg pushed me aside and immediately called 911. I don't remember much else. I don't remember them taking him out on a gurney. I don't remember how I got home. But I do remember the note, lying on the ground next to my feet. A patch of brown paper torn from a grocery bag, with 6 words scrawled in his handwriting with a black Sharpie. My wife and son murdered me. Later at the hospital, they told me he took an overdose of insulin and went into a diabetic coma. Enough time had passed before we found him that he was essentially brain dead and the chances of recovery were extremely low. I don't know how long I stared into that fridge before picking up the phone again. Yes, it's Duke in room 243 again. I think the last guest left their medication in the fridge. There's a needle in there too. Could someone please come safely remove it and restock the minibar? Of course, sir. Someone will be right up. I closed the fridge door and moved as far away from it as possible, but I couldn't stop staring. Worthless. Worthless. You killed me. You junkie. A father can only take so much shame. The voice was in my head. Of course it was in my head. Ghosts aren't real. Lots of people are diabetic. It's a coincidence. I'm just re-experiencing trauma and the voice is all in my head. I tried breathing exercises. I tried to be mindful and detach myself from my thoughts. But the voice didn't stop until the knock came from the door. Sir, I'm here to restock your minibar. I tried to get up. I tried to answer. But I just sat there mute and paralyzed. Again, a knock. Sir, are you there? I mustered up the will to speak. "Can you let yourself in, please?" There was silence, followed by the thumbing of the lock, and the same man who had replaced the TV walked into the room. "What seems to be the problem, sir?" I struggled to speak, but eventually just pointed to the fridge. The man took an uncomfortably long look at me, furrowing his brow in concern. He opened the door, and it was full of nothing but overpriced booze and snacks. "Sir, are you okay? Do you need me to call someone for you?" No, thank you. I'm okay." "Would you like to change rooms?" "No, that's not needed. I promise I'm okay. I won't be a bother anymore." He leaned down to close the fridge again, but I asked him to leave it open. I averted my gaze as he gathered his things to leave, pausing at the door to say, "It's not a bother at all, sir. Please call if there's anything we can do to improve your stay." Once he was gone, I rushed back to the mini fridge, feeling the bottles in my hand, holding them like they were a lifeline to reality. I quickly tore one open and downed it in a single gulp. "You frickin' junkie. Can't face reality. Can't even face your father. You're gonna drink yourself to death now." Why was I doing this to myself? I was obviously having an episode. Why was I putting myself through this trauma? I should go home and cuddle with my partners. Put this behind me. There's no ghost. There's just my pain. I should go to a hospital and check myself in. I need help. My mind raced with these thoughts, but my hands just kept cracking open bottles, and my father's voice continued to echo in my head. "Worthless sissy. I gave you everything. I taught you how to be a man. I taught you how to succeed in life. Is this how you repay me? You had so much potential and you threw it away. You're a failure. You might as well just end it now and stop embarrassing your family." And then those two horrible words. The room was spinning, and the darkness was closing in. I went back to the fridge for another drink, but when I opened it, I saw a sight that hadn't plagued me for over a decade. A needle, and the biggest bag of black tar I'd ever seen in my life. And then I blacked out. I tried being by his side in the hospital, but after a couple of minutes, panic would set in, and I would run out of the room to chain smoke and cry outside. It didn't make any sense to me. I hated this man. I spent my whole life wishing he would die, and now he has, and it hurts even more. Why am I crying? Why am I mourning someone who had caused me so much pain? Was it because he loved me? Sure, he loved me, but that doesn't make the abuse go away. Was it because he was sick and in pain? No, I'm sick and in pain too, and that's no excuse to hurt the people you love. All I knew is it felt like a part of me was ripped out, leaving a hole I would never be able to fill. After a couple of weeks on life support, the decision was made to move him to hospice. Hospice, at least in my experience, operates under an incredibly twisted morality. In a sane world, if the decision was made to let someone with no chance of recovery go, you would think it would be a quick and painless infusion of morphine, enough to bring a peaceful end to it all. But no, apparently that would be immoral. The moral thing to do in this messed up world is just withdraw food and water and just sit back and watch the person slowly die of thirst. I was there at the hospice facility all day for over a week with my mom and my aunt and various other friends and family visiting his bedside. Everyone kept urging me to say my goodbyes. But why? Why say goodbye to someone who was already gone? Why say goodbye to someone who had caused me so much pain? Some days when everyone else was engaged elsewhere and his room was empty, I would stand at the threshold. I could see him there in bed, a withered husk, slowly shutting down, mewling and groaning through parched, cracked lips. I'd tell myself I would go in. I would tell myself I would hold his hand, I'd tell myself I'd say goodbye. I'd tell myself I'd forgive him. But I didn't. I just stood at that threshold, balling up my fists so hard in a combination of anxiety and anger that my nails drew blood, crying. And then I would hear someone walking down the hallway, and I would run and hide. When I came to, I was huddled in the far corner of the room. The air was frigid and it was dark, with just enough light coming through the window to highlight the white plumes of my breath. There in the back where the hotel mattress once rested was my father's hospice bed. It felt like I was standing in that doorway again, staring at the husk that was once my father curled in a fetal position facing away from me. I couldn't move and the room was deathly silent, until the voice started again. Too much of a baby to even face me when I'm helpless and dying, huh? You miserable little person. I had one son, one chance at a legacy, and God cursed me with you. Except this time, the voice wasn't in my head. It was ragged and raspy, and coming from the body in the room. I started hyperventilating as the thing that was my father uncurled his skeleton form and turned to face me. His skin was jaundiced and sagging. His eyes were cloudy and unfocused, but aimed straight at me. Blood ran down his chin as the venom spewing from his throat tore the dry and withered skin of his mouth. You killed me. You and your mother killed me. You're worthless. I wish you had died with that needle in your arm, you worthless junkie. The shame of being your father killed me. You know what you have to do. Make me proud and end it. I pulled myself into a ball, sobbing and gasping for air. I heard the loud thump of his body hitting the floor. I tried to ignore him and keep my eyes closed, but every time that I chanced to peek, he had inched closer, leaving a streak of blood on the hotel carpet behind him. This is just a nightmare. This is just a nightmare. I opened my eyes again and he was nearly on me, and his eyes open unblinking, always staring straight into me, into my soul. I wrenched my eyes shut and screamed. Too much of a sissy coward to anything right. Such a waste. You're broken. I've never known someone so smart who was so stupid. I felt his weight, surprisingly light, press on my body. And then I felt a cold, skeletal hand grip my arm with surprising strength. You're never going to be happy. You're just going to keep messing up. I'm so ashamed of you. Let me finally have some peace. Let me help you. I felt a sharp pain as a needle was pressed roughly into my arm. I took a deep breath and did my best to calm my mind. Mixed deeply in the suffocating terror that agonized every cell in my body, I felt a tiny, warm spark. Empathy, maybe. Pity, I don't know. But I latched onto it and drew strength from it to open my eyes and speak, just as his face was inches from mine, bathing me in the warm, fetid stench of death. I'm sorry. I'm sorry you suffered so much. I'm sorry that I couldn't help you. I forgive you, and I thank you for showing me how not to live. I'm not you, and I'll never be you. I hope you find peace finally, but you're gone. You're gone and I'm still here, and I'm going to live and love, and do my best to be decent. I hope that makes you proud, but ultimately, that doesn't matter. I'm living for myself. He kept staring for a moment, his mouth and eyes narrowing in confusion. And then the spark faded from his eyes and his corpse collapsed in my lap. Once again, everything faded to black. I came to in a familiar setting. The morning light was filtering through the blinds. Room 234 was exactly how I remembered it all those years ago. Furniture overturned, mattress against the wall, TV broken on the ground. My mouth was dry and my head was pounding. As I moved to stand up, I felt a sharp pain in my arm. Looking down, I saw a needle in my arm, full of a dark, amber fluid, enough to bring a peaceful end to it all. I carefully plucked it from my arm and held it up to the light. I could see the small crimson plume indicating the needle had found its way into a vein, but its contents had not been pushed in. I'm still not sure what exactly happened. I can't say for certain whether it really was the hand of my dead father that put that needle in my arm, but I knew it was my hand that didn't push the plunger. After doing my best to clean up, I packed my bag and made my way to the lobby to check out, and sheepishly advised them of the damage to the room. Standing at the front desk was Greg. He didn't recognize me at first, but after seeing my name, his eyes went wide. He looked up at me. "Duke, I'm so sorry. Are you okay?" "Yeah, I'm going to be okay. I'm afraid to inform you there's been some damage to the room. You can charge it to my card." "Don't worry about it, sir. We will take care of it." Greg was silent for the rest of checkout, but as he handed me my receipt, he spoke up again. "Why did you do it?" I considered the question for a while and then answered, "Closure, I guess. I don't think you'll be having any more problems with room 243.